Hello, and hi, and welcome to Harry Potter Abridged. If you're just joining us, we are making our way through Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. And today we are on Chapter 4, which is entitled The Leaky Cauldron. And we're still in the part of this book that is basically the setup for the rest of the story. Not a ton happens in this chapter, but we do learn a few things. That is for certain. Some important things that again set up the plot of the rest of the book. So let's get into it. The previous chapter ended with Harry being, it was basically the journey from Privet Drive to the Leaky Cauldron, where the Minister of Magic, Cornelius Fudge, set Harry up in the Leaky Cauldron to have a room and a place to stay, with access to Diagon Alley, for 3 weeks before he has to go back to school, which, again, for somebody his age and in that situation, that's a pretty long time. I mean, relatively speaking, especially when every week at the Dursleys was like an eternity of hell. So it's like he's getting the opposite here. So it's a bit of a treat. And it said the first thing that the chapter says is that it takes Harry several days to get used to this, as it's referred to, strange new freedom. Because he's never had that. I mean, even at school, obviously there's the holidays at school, where they can kind of get up whenever they want to and do whatever they want to. But that's still in the context of the school. It's in the castle, which is, don't get me wrong, really fucking cool. But this is it's not completely unsupervised, but it's practically unsupervised because Tom is just there. Fudge says he's leaving Tom to watch him or whatever. Not leaving. Tom owns the bar and everything, but Tom's just there basically in case of emergency, that's all that. So there's not like anybody really like watching him. But then again, he's surrounded by adult witches and wizards that are all the shop owners and stuff in Diagon Alley. So anyway, the point being is that he just has basically the ability to do whatever the hell he wants to as long as he stays in Diagon Alley, which, as it turns out, has all kinds of cool shit to do and look at and eat and buy and whatnot. So Harry is he's quite happy, and he has no compulsion whatsoever to go back out into Muggle London to break his word to Fudge that he would stay there. He's perfectly happy to stay in the wizarding side of London, or the wizarding bit of London. It's not really a side. So we get a little bit of his daily routine. He's eating breakfast in the Leaky Cauldron, and he's getting the chance to sort of see the various types of people that come in and out of there, which is, again, kind of cool. It's the only other place, maybe not the only other, but the only other place that we know about anyway, aside from Hogsmeade, that is purely wizarding like this, and where there's not gatherings, but just people, it is kind of gatherings, but just informal, people in and out doing their shopping, coming to eat or have a drink or do whatever they're doing. So that's a different experience, obviously, for Harry, because it's like he's really living in the wizarding world, not just in Hogwarts, which is part of it, but he's surrounded by kids and teachers there. Here he's just out in the world where there's just average everyday witches and wizards, going about their daily lives. So it's a different experience for him, and it's pretty cool because it's the first time in the story that he's able to do anything like that, which is interesting because one of the plot points of this novel is Harry's desire to visit Hogsmeade, which is the only true wizarding village in England, apparently. But this is, he doesn't realize it. Maybe he does, but I don't think he's thinking about it in that context. But that's what this is. This is that kind of place. He's getting a similar experience, just with it be it's just a little bit more condensed, there's actually probably, well, it seems anyway from the way it's described, like there's almost more shops and restaurants and things here than there are in Diagon Alley, but I mean, than there are in Hogsmeade. But here it's all like on one street and they're all sort of like adjacent to each other versus being like separate buildings that are all sort of like set up in a little village square. But still, anyway. So, let's see, and then of course after he would have his breakfast in the Leaky Cauldron, he would head out and go into Diagon Alley and basically wander around exploring the shops and eating and just kind of paying attention to what everybody else is doing. People are talking about Sirius Black. He's able to do his summer homework instead of having to hide under blankets. Now he can sit out in the sunshine, and it mentions that he likes to do this outside of Florian Fortescue's ice cream parlor, which sounds like a pretty great place to hang out and do your homework as a teenager. And apparently, Fortescue, like, not only does he give Harry free ice cream, like every half hour. Which, by the way, is a lot of unnecessary ice cream, no matter what age you are, but it does sound kind of amazing and delicious at the same time. But he also apparently knows about a good deal about medieval witch burnings too. So he's getting a little help with his homework. That's nice. And of course, he's gone to Gringotts and he's got his money bag full of wizarding money, and so he's for the first time really having to like sort of exercise some self-control over spending too much, because he's got all the coolest wizarding shops in the area right at his fingertips. And he's he reminds himself what it might be like to have to go to the Dursleys and ask them for money if he ran out. So that's a motivation to be careful. But truth be told, from the way it sounds, like he would actually have to do this like every summer for like a few years to actually run through all the gold that he actually has access to. But nonetheless, I think it's admirable that he's trying to keep it under control at this age. I admire him myself. Let's see. And of course we get a little bit of like some of the things that he resists buying, like a solid gold set of gobstones, which, by the way, gobstones just sounds like a really ridiculous game, because it's like, it says that it's a wizarding game like marbles, but where the stones squirt a nasty smelling liquid into the other player's face when they lose a point. Like, I know it makes for a good description, but like, who the hell would want to play a game where like that's gonna happen to you every time you lose a point? Anyway, and isn't it like really popular too? Like, it seems like that was one of the places that when Harry goes to the Ministry in Book 5 for his hearing, and he's hearing all the things in the lift, or the elevator as we would call it in America, I feel like when they gets to the games and sports division or whatever, where the Quidditch office is, that gobstones is in there too, and I'm just like, who the hell wants to play this game? But I don't know. Apparently, it must not like burn your eyes or do anything. Otherwise, like, again, like I don't know who would want that. And it smells bad. That's the part that really gets me. I'm like, why could it just like squirt water in your face and like have done with that? But I don't know. Anyway. There's also a perfect moving model of the galaxy, which apparently was really cool, and apparently means that he would never have to take another astronomy lesson. But I don't know if that's how that works either, because I mean, wouldn't you still have to study? Just because it's all there in front of you, that's a lot to look at. In fact, the whole galaxy, really? Anyway, whatever. That's a lot. But the thing that tempts his wallet the most is in quality, is it quality Quidditch supplies? Yes, it is quality Quidditch supplies. About a week after he gets there, he sees a crowd, and there is a new broom out called the Firebolt. And this is one of the times where Rowling actually does plant a nice little, not spoiler, but just something random that well, it's not random, but something that's going to happen in the next book. Everybody's, oohing and eyeing over the Firebolt, and somebody says that the Irish international side has just put in an order for these and their favorites for the World Cup. And as we know, they are in fact going to be at the World Cup when Harry goes to attend it at the beginning of Goblet of Fire, the next book. So that's kind of cool. So it seems like by this point in the book that she's sort of, or this point in the writing process, I mean to say, that she's really getting more and more mapped out for the rest of the story. And I know that's sort of a minor detail relative to other things, but nonetheless, it's kind of cool because I've mentioned before, there does seem to have and this book has some of it too, with my whole issue with the Azkaban guards, which don't need to be referred to that way. But there's a lot of things that it seems like you don't really hear about them until they're the beginning of the book that they're going to be mentioned in, when it would have been kind of nice to have had them laid in a book or two earlier, just to make it feel less obvious as to why they're there. But whatever. So yes, the Firebolt, and he reads about it, and it's got all kinds of cool specs, and it says that it can go to from 0 to 150, 150 miles an hour for those of you who are kilometer people. Well, I can't do the conversion off the top of my head, but my point is, it's really fucking fast. It's faster than it's legal to drive pretty much anywhere except for maybe the Autobahn or something like that. It's dangerously fast. I'm a little surprised that brooms are even allowed to go that fast. But then again, I'm always kind of surprised at how fast cars are allowed to go, being that it's not legal to drive them that fast almost anywhere, except for on racetracks and like I said, the Autobahn or something. Whatever. That's and there's not even a price on it. It says price on request. So that just lets you know how expensive it is. But and so Harry's obviously he's tempted, but he's also well, I've got my Nimbus 2000 and I've never lost on it, and it's fast as fuck too, and it's only a couple years old, and it's amazing also. So even though he really, 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 really wants the Firebolt, he also is but my Nimbus 2000 is kind of amazing too. So he doesn't ask for the price. He doesn't want to find out how much he would be out. Anyway. So then he goes ahead and does his school shopping ahead of time, because why the hell not? You got 3 weeks in Diagon Alley. Get it out of the way. So he gets his potions, ingredients, robes, and his books. When he gets to the okay, so I think I mentioned this earlier, but I was deferring to this chapter. When he gets to the bookshop, Flourish and Blots, he sees a display in the window, and it's like a cage, and it's full of the Monster Book of Monsters, a bunch of them, and they're the books are fighting each other, which is kind of crazy. So it's somebody actually made this book and enchanted them to act like little monsters. And it's interesting to me that, because we learn later, and I'm just this isn't an important spoiler, but we learn later that from Hagrid that all you have to do to deal with these books is to stroke the spine. Apparently, there's kind of I feel like there's what, I can't remember now. Does it describe it here? I don't think it does. Almost like scales or something sticking off the spine. But anyway, if you stroke the spine, then it just kind of goes limp and acts like it's been, I don't know. It's like playing fluffy music. It relaxes it, and then the book, you can open the book and use it. I don't know if it, like if the you would think, my point being is that you would think that the fucking shop owner would be told this by the book manufacturer. Because even though Hagrid set the book, it's not like Hagrid made the books. You know, he just knew about them and decided that it would be a cool book to use for his upcoming class, which of course Harry doesn't know he has with him yet. But Harry realizes now, looking at his book list for the first time, that, oh, this is his Care of Magical Creatures book. He still doesn't know who's teaching him yet, but he's like, understands now why Hagrid had said in his note that it was going to be important or useful this year. So anyway, he goes in, and the manager is like, all like, oh, get out of my way, I'll get, blah, blah, blah. And Harry's like, no, I got that one. And he's like, oh, fuck me. He's like, I'm never carrying these again. These are ridiculous. Like, they're and they're like, the books are like tearing each other apart to a certain degree, like tearing pages out of each other. And the shop owner's like saying he's been bitten like 5 times already that day. So he's like putting on big gloves to like get books out and stuff. And he's having to like poke them with a walking stick to keep them from like fighting each other and stuff. And he mentions another book that they carried that was even worse because it was he said, I thought we'd seen the worst when we ordered 200 copies of the Invisible Book of Invisible Book of Invisibility. And they never found them. Which is also strange because, like, how did they get delivered? If, like, I mean, wouldn't you know where, like, somebody set them, even if they were invisible? Why on earth there would be an invisible book, I don't really know. I mean, maybe it, like, becomes visible when you open it. Maybe that's sort of like the magic of it, but I don't know. I think maybe it's just a good joke. So anyway, so then he's getting his books. He has to go to the fortune-telling section to get his Unfogging the Future. And while he's waiting on the manager to step up on the ladder and get the book for him, he catches sight of a different book. Where is it? Yes. There's a display on a table, and the book is called Death Omens: What to Do When You Know the Worst is Coming. But Harry's staring at it because on the cover, where is it? There it is. It's showing a big black dog with that's like large as a bear with gleaming eyes, and he's like thinking it looks oddly familiar because, of course, he saw a big hulking black dog in Magnolia Crescent before the night bus showed up. So anyway, so he's kind of like a little freaked out by that because he's like, Death Omens, huh? That doesn't sound so good. So he tears his eyes away from it, though, and gets away from it. Because the shop manager's like, he's like, oh, I wouldn't read that if I were you. You'll start seeing death omens everywhere. It's enough to frighten anyone to death. Which is the argument that Hermione makes against death omens too later. Like, well, that maybe people are scared to death by them, not that they actually die because they saw them. Sort of a catch-22 sort of thing there, but not really. It just sounds like it. So he takes his book back to the Leaky Cauldron, and he's kind of in a daze. I think like that death omen thing kind of like fucked with him a little bit. So he's a little like, oh man. So goes up to his room, blah blah blah, drops off his books. And he's telling himself, like, it can't be a death omen. Yeah, I was just panicking when I saw that thing in Magnolia Crescent. It was probably just a stray dog. Which is funny because it's like, it's not just a random dog, but it's also not a death omen. So that's like what makes the mystery like interesting. Because it's like, it's neither thing that he's worried about, but, or it's not nothing. That's what I mean to say. It's not what he's worried about, but it's also not nothing. So let's see. And for a little extra comedic effect, there's also a mirror that talks to you in his room in the Leaky Cauldron. And after he gets done talking to himself about the death omen thing, he goes to flatten his hair in the mirror, and the mirror's like, "You're fighting a losing battle there, dear," because he really is. And so as we get closer to the end of his time there, he's starting to look for Ron and Hermione, because he's not exactly sure when they're going to show up, but they're supposed to be meeting here. Because both of them, in their letters at the beginning of the book, said that they were going to be there and that they would like to meet him there. So he's keeping an eye out. In the meantime, he runs into Seamus and Dean Thomas, and and they're also like staring at the firebolt, like, oh my god. He sees Neville. It's weird though. It says Harry didn't stop to chat. I guess maybe I guess at this point they haven't really become that close of friends. But by the same token, like these are all three of these people that have just been mentioned. Seamus, Dean, and Neville are all like his. Aside from Ron, these are the people that sleep in his dorm every night. So I mean, they're kind of his friends regardless. But for whatever reason, well, not for whatever reason, it says that Neville's with his grandmother, who in a later book is all like, oh, Harry Potter, blah, blah, blah. Neville speaks highly of you, etc., etc. But here, for whatever reason, he like avoids her. I get. Well, he also says it says that he really hopes that she never finds out that he was impersonating Neville when he was avoiding the Ministry of Magic. But of course, she's not going to find out. It wasn't like he was running around all over England, like telling people he was Neville Longbottom. Like it was Stan Shunpike and Ernie on the night bus, and they found out the same night that he was actually Harry Potter. So that story is kind of gonna not really go anywhere. But nonetheless, he feels guilty about it. So it's the last day of the holidays. And he's like, well, shit, I guess I'll meet Ron and Hermione on the train. But as he's wandering around, he finally hears them yell, or hears Hermione. And they're both sitting outside of Florian Fortescue's. And so he comes over to them, and Ron's all freckly and Hermione's very brown. So they've all also obviously both been out in the sun a lot for their holiday. Woo boo boo. And so there they are, and they're, obviously happy to see each other, and they're catching up, and they say that they went to the Leaky Cauldron first, but they said you were out, so they had to go looking for him or whatever. And Harry's like, how'd you know I was there? And Ron's like, Dad. And Harry's like, oh right, he works at the Ministry. Clearly Fudge would have told him all about the whole blow up, as it were. And Hermione's like, did you really blow up your aunt? And Harry's like, I didn't mean to. And Hermione's all like, I can't believe you weren't expelled. And Harry's like, yeah, I don't know either. I thought I was going to get arrested. And he asked Ron if his dad had mentioned why he didn't get arrested, why he got off. And he's like, well, probably because it's you, huh? And so that's another thing. There's always this, well, maybe not always, but for the overwhelming majority of the story, there's this undercurrent of, Ron's Harry's best friend, and nonetheless, well, because it's Harry, obviously there's all these things that happen to him, for him, about him, special precautions because of him, special treatment because of it's him. And Harry doesn't ask for any of this shit. And like, there's a lot of extra bullshit that goes along with being Harry. And of course, also Harry has like a big bunch of gold, and Ron's poor. So like, in a lot of ways, Harry's everything that Ron's not. And, Ron's the youngest of seven. Is it seven? I think it's seven. Anyway, he's the youngest of a large family. Everything's hand-me-down, and everything's, like, they're poor. And so, and even this, I mean, like, Ron's like, famous Harry Potter and all that. He's like, I'd hate to see what the Ministry would do to me if I blew up my aunt, and so... Granted, I don't know what would actually happen. Maybe it wouldn't, but nonetheless, like the way Ron sees it, it's because he's Harry, and he, like, Ron's simultaneously like happy to be friends with like one of the most famous people in the wizarding world, and also like jealous. I mean, he just can't fucking help himself but be a bit jealous, and sometimes that jealousy does get the better of him, as we will see in the next book. Anyway, so anyway, we find out that everybody's staying at the Leaky Cauldron that night, like the Weasleys and Hermione too, and they're all gonna go off to King's Cross to catch the train the next morning. So they have basically the afternoon together. Oh, and Ron's like, look, and he shows Harry his new wand, which I feel like we never really heard much about his original one, but this one does get the full description. 14 inches, willow, and containing a unicorn tail hair, which is nice because I feel like his first wand was a hand-me-down, so this is like Ron's real, like, I mean, if the wand chooses the wizard when you go to get one for yourself, this is Ron's wand, and so that's kind of cool because it's the one he's going to have from here on out. Because I don't think anything else happens to Ron's, like, this wand. Yeah, I don't think so. And there's mention of the monster books. Let's see. And then Harry looks over at Hermione's stuff, and he's like, what in the world? And she's got, like, 3 bulging bags of books. And she's like, well, I'm taking more new subjects, aren't I? And so she rattles them off: arithmancy and magical creatures and divination and ancient runes and muggle studies. And Ron's like, what are you doing muggle studies for? You grew up as a muggle. Your parents are muggles. But she's, of course, like, but it'll be fascinating to see what wizards think. Which I guess it would be, but fuck, man. And Harry's like, are you planning to eat or sleep at all this year, Hermione? Which is kind of a foreshadowing for what's going to what this year's going to be like for Hermione, because she barely is going to eat and sleep, especially the sleep bit. And we'll learn why later. But anyway, so Hermione's like, well, I've still got some money, and it's my birthday coming up, and her parents gave her some money to buy her an early birthday present, and so she's like, I want to get an owl, which of course she's not going to, but and again we get mention of Ron's situation, because she's like, well, Harry's got Hedwig and you've got Errol, and Ron's like, I haven't. Errol's the family owl. All I've got is Scabbers. And so again, with the reference to Ron's financial situation, he doesn't have his own owl. He just has a hand-me-down rat. And he's like, and I want to get him looked at too, because as he pulls Scabbers out, Harry's like, man, he does look thinner. He's like, because Ron's like, I don't think Egypt agreed with him. So, of course, Harry, being like the Diagon Alley expert at this point, is like, well, I know where to go, so let's go over to the Magical Menagerie. And so it says they paid for their ice cream, so I guess, well, I don't know if Harry got one or not, maybe, but because he was getting all those free ones before, but Anyway, so they go into the Magical Menagerie, and of course there's animals everywhere, and we get some descriptions, I think. Enormous purple toads and gigantic tortoise with a jewel-encrusted shell, which sounds interesting. Poisonous orange snails, which I can't imagine what use they would have, but whatever. A fat white rabbit that keeps changing into a top hat, which I think is kind of funny because that's like sort of a nod to like the standard magician stereotype outside of this wizarding world, but just in like the real world. The illusionist. Cats all over the place. Cage of ravens. Some custard-colored fur balls that are humming. I don't know if those are puffskins or whatever. Anyway. And then on the counter, there's a cage of sleek black rats. And they're like showing off and like playing a game because the magical animals are smarter, obviously, than non-magical animals. So they have like little powers or heightened intelligence or whatever it is. So anyway, they've been waiting on somebody that was at the counter, and that person leaves, and Ron goes up first, and he's like, "Oh, my rat, he's off color, and he's looking messed up." And so she says, "Bang him on the counter," which I don't know why you would bang a rat on the counter. That seems a bit harsh. But anyway, so he pulls Scabbers out, and she's like, oh, and wait a minute, is it mentioned here? Somewhere I thought it was mentioned that you know he is missing a toe, which is important. It might have been in a different part. I thought it was in this section. Let me look at it again. And when he places him down too, like the other rats in the cage like stop their little game and go like look, which is kind of funny too. And the lady's like, "How old is he?" And Ron's like, "He belonged to my brother. He's pretty old." And the lady's like, "What powers does he have?" And he's like, And yeah, as it turns out, Scabbers has never exhibited any sign of any kind of powers. So that's obviously a bit skeptical, or not suspicious, I mean to say. But whatever. So we move on from that. Yes, and then the witch. It says the witch's eyes moved from Scatter's tattered left ear to his front paw, which had a toe missing. So yeah, that's important. So anyway, and she's like trying to like convince Ron that maybe he should get a new rat, but he doesn't want to do that. So she gives him some rat tonic, whatever that would be, some kind of potential, healing agent for a rat. So anyway, it's funny because it's like Ron's always like complaining about how dull and boring Scabbers is, but at the same time it's his animal, so he's got like an odd affinity for Scabbers. But anyway, so yeah. And then, so as he's about to get his rat tonic, something large and orange jumps down from the highest cage and lands on Ron's head, and then jumps straight at Scabbers. And the lady's like, "No, Crookshanks, no!" And so begins the adversarial relationship of Crookshanks the cat and Scabbers the rat, who's, well, anyway. And Scabbers like runs, like he jumps off the counter and like dashes out of the shop, and so Ron and Harry like run out and go find him. It takes them like 10 minutes to find him, and they finally find him under like a bin outside. And they don't even like, he's like asking Harry like what it was, and Harry's like, it was either a really big cat or a small tiger. Anyway, Hermione didn't come out yet, so they're like, huh. But Harry's like, she's probably getting her owl. So they're walking back up the street because they had to head down the street a little ways to find Scabbers. It's really kind of amazing that they found him at all, to be honest. But that's the thing about Diagon Alley, though. It's not like it's open air. It's not like it's open spaces. Like it's, but still, he could have ducked off into any shop. Anyway, they find him. So they head back, and as they're getting back to the Magical Menagerie, Hermione comes out, and instead of an owl in a cage, she's carrying the fucking cat, because of course she is. Ron can't believe that she bought it, and of course Hermione's like, he's gorgeous, isn't he? So yeah. Anyway, and Ron's like, oh man, he's like, what about Scabbers? Like Scabbers needs rest and relaxation, and this cat is like gonna be a terror for him. And anyway, and Hermione's like, Crookshanks will be in my dormitory and Scabbers will be in yours. It'll be fine. And also, here's your rat tonic. But what we see there early on is that Crookshanks is very intelligent. We don't know that yet, but that's what we're really getting a glimpse of. And sees that Scabbers. It's not just that cats eat rats, which they do, but there's more to it than that. Like Crookshanks sees something about Scabbers that nobody else sees right now. So yeah. So they go back to the Leaky Cauldron because they're done with their stuff, and Mr. Weasley is in there reading the Daily Prophet, and so they come in and talk to him for a bit, and Harry sees that on the front of the paper there's still Sirius Black, and so he's like, they haven't found him, huh? He's like, Mr. Weasley's like, nope. It's like he's telling him that everybody at the Ministry's been pulled off their regular shit just to like look for him, and still nothing. And again, with the money thing, Ron's like, would we get a reward if we caught him? It'd be good to get some more money. And Mr. Weasley's like, don't be an idiot, Ron. Like, come on, son. He's like, Black's not going to be caught by 13-year-olds. It's going to be the Azkaban guards who'll get him back. You mark my words. Again, with the fucking Azkaban guards. Why can't you call them Dementors? Okay, anyway. Maybe I'll stop bitching about that. Probably I won't until after we get to the chapter where they start calling them Dementors. But anyway. Beep, 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 beep. And then Mrs. Weasley comes in, and she's got other shopping that she's brought in, and the twins are with her. And Percy is also with them, who is now the newly elected head boy, as we find out from Ron's letter earlier. And Ginny is there. And it says that Ginny's acting even more embarrassed than usual, even though she's already obviously had a crush on Harry from the get-go. But now it's more than that because, Harry saved her at the end of the previous book, and so she's still kind of like mortified by everything that happened, being possessed by Voldemort and all that shit. Probably more so that she was tricked by the diary is what she's probably the most embarrassed about. And then Percy, because Percy's fucking weird and like so he wants so badly to be like important and powerful, so he's all like shaking Harry's hand all solemnly like, Harry, how nice to see you. And Harry's like trying not to laugh at him, and Percy's all like, I hope you are well. And Harry's like, yeah, I'm good, Percy. Good to see you too. And of course, Fred and George can't help but mock Percy because somebody needs to. And so they're all like, Harry, simply splendid to see you, old boy. Marvelous! Absolutely spiffing! And Mrs. Weasley's getting on to them, and Fred's like, Mum! How really corking to see you. Fred and George are great. Anyway, and so Mrs. Weasley's like, no, really, enough. And so, of course, Mrs. Weasley is very proud about Percy's head boyship, and of course, she's like, second head boy in the family, and Fred's like, and last. Mrs. Weasley's like, I don't doubt that. She's like, I noticed they haven't made you prefects. And of course, they're like, why would we want to be prefects? It'd spoil all the fun. And Ginny giggles, and they're like, and Mrs. Weasley's like, you want to set a better example? And Percy's all like, Ginny's got another brother to set an example. And so there's that. And George is like, we tried to shut him in a pyramid, but Mom spotted us. And I wonder if they really did. Maybe they did, but I mean, because it's like there's like a fine line with Fred and George and their pranks. Like on the whole, they're not ever really trying to like hurt anyone or cause any like real trouble. They're just like, they just like they're like Peeves light. They like to just cause a bit of mayhem and to be funny. Most importantly, they like to be funny. But Percy, like, is so, like, he's the only one in the family that acts the way that he does. And so I think that it bothers them because I think deep down they're, like, irritated by the fact that he's, like, so straight-laced and I guess power hungry is the only way to, like, kind of, well, yeah, kind of. I mean, yeah, he's got, there's a difference between ambition and wanting to be powerful or whatever. And so the way he comes across and the way he acts, it's just like it's hard for them being how they are, not to mock him a bit. I mean, we don't know a ton about Bill and Charlie. We learn bits here and there, but they both seem like they have pretty good senses of humor. They're not as goofy and as joking and as mischievous as Fred and George, it doesn't seem, because one of them was head boy and they were both, pretty successful at school and are successful outside of school, after school. But Percy's just, yeah. Anyway, so they have a nice dinner and they have a bunch of courses and they eat together with a bunch of tables pulled together, and we find out that tomorrow, because Fred asks how they're getting to King's Cross, and we find out that the Ministry is providing them with some cars, and they're like, huh. And as it turns out, of course, it's because of Harry. But I don't think that's actually what he says. Yeah. Mr. Weasley's like, well, we haven't got one anymore, because, they did have the Ford Anglia before it ran off into the forest. And he's like, so he's kind of being evasive. He's like, well, and as I work at the Ministry, they're doing me a favor. But Harry can kind of sense that he's not letting on the whole thing, the full story, as it were. And Mrs. Weasley's like kind of like supporting him, being like, yeah, and it's great too, because, you guys got a ton of luggage. We couldn't be on the Muggle Underground with all that. So, let's see. And for whatever reason, they put Percy and Ron in the same room. Poor Ron. So they're like, Mrs. Weasley's like, you're all packed, right? And Percy's all telling on Ron, like, Ron hasn't put all his things in his trunk yet. He's dumped them on my bed. So they have to go pack. Of course, Harry's got his own shit taken care of, but so they head upstairs to their rooms, and Harry's just getting all his shit together, and he hears Percy and Ron yelling at each other, and goes over to see what's going on, and turns out, of course, Percy's head boy badge is missing, Because, of course, Fred and George took it, but we don't know that just yet. And Ron can't find Scabbers' rat tonic. So at the moment, they're both like, we both have something missing. And Ron's like, I think I left it down in the bar, which he's actually being honest. But Percy's like, you're not going anywhere until we found my badge. I'm like, it's a fucking badge, Percy, but whatever. And Harry's like, I'll go find the rat tonic, Ron. It's cool. So he heads downstairs. And this is really coming up here, like the most important part of this whole chapter. Like I said, the rest of it is really just sort of like navigating through the things that have to happen between the beginning of the story at the Dursleys and Harry getting to school this year. I mean, and it's entertaining. I enjoy this book a lot, actually. And it's kind of cool to get a little bit more of a look into Diagon Alley and to learn a little bit more about all this stuff. But anyway, so Harry's coming down the hallway and he hears more raised voices. And as he gets closer, he realizes that it's Mr. and Mrs. Weasley. And he's not wanting them to know that he's hearing them, rowing. Which is, by the way, that's another for you American listeners or USCN listeners. We don't use that word. We say argue or argument or arguing. They say row or rowing, which looks like rowing, by the way. But again, if you know what you're looking for. Anyway, Harry doesn't want them to know that he's heard them, and then as he's kind of trying to get by, he hears his own voice, and he's like, oh, well, let me stop and eavesdrop then, because they're talking about me, which, I mean, anybody probably would. And so they're going back and forth about something not to tell Harry, and Mr. Weasley's like, Harry's got a right to know. And he's like, Fudge insists on treating him like a child, but he's 13 years old. And Mrs. Weasley's like, it would terrify him, blah, blah, blah. He's happy not knowing. And Mr. Weasley's like, I just want to put him on his guard. He's like, you know what Harry and Ron are like? They ended up in the forest before. Which, by the way, I thought this was the part where they miscalculated the number of times that they've been in the forest, but either this has been corrected in this text or it's just a different place that I'm thinking of, because it says here, it just says they've even ended up in the Forbidden Forest, which is accurate. They've been in there together once, the previous year. But he's like, but Harry can't do that this year. He's like, when I think about what could have happened to him when he ran away from home, and I mean, he and this is pretty intense, because he's like, if the night bus hadn't picked him up, I'm prepared to bet he would have been dead before the Ministry found him. And that's, I mean, at this point in the story, like, that's pretty fucking heavy to hear, like, dead. But of course, Miss Weasley's like, but he's not dead. He's fine. So then we finally figure out that this is about Sirius Black. And so Mr. Weasley's like, they say Sirius Black's mad, but he was clever enough to escape from Azkaban, and that's not supposed to be possible. And nobody's seen him, and it's been a month. And he's like, I don't care what Fudge is telling the papers. We're not anywhere near catching him than we were before. So, like, when we started, in other words. And so they're kind of back and forth, and Mrs. Weasley's like, but Harry's safe at Hogwarts, and Mr. Weasley's like, we thought Azkaban was safe, but if he can break out there, then he could break into Hogwarts, which, by the way, is totally a foreshadowing of what's going to happen, too, because he can break into Hogwarts, but we don't know at this point in the story how he was able to break out of Azkaban, nor how he'll be able to break into Hogwarts, but it's the same reason, as it turns out. And she's like, but nobody's really sure that Black's after Harry. And Mr. Weasley's getting more angry. And we find out that even though it hasn't been in the papers, that when Fudge recently went to visit Azkaban while Black was... it was the night that Black escaped, actually. The guards told Fudge that he'd been saying in his sleep, he's at Hogwarts, he's at Hogwarts. which of course makes Mr. Weasley think, and Fudge too, that means that Sirius Black is after Harry. And so Mr. Weasley's theory is that Black must think that if he kills Harry, that this will bring Voldemort back. So, and then he's like, he's had 12 years to brood on it ever since, who was defeated and Black got locked up. And so anyway, so at the end, Mrs. Weasley's like, fine, you got to do what you think is right. But don't forget Dumbledore. I don't think anybody can hurt Harry while he's at Hogwarts and Dumbledore's there. And we find out, of course, Dumbledore knows about all of this. And we also find out that the Azkaban guards are going to be stationing themselves around the entrances to the school. And that Dumbledore is not happy about it. So we get, that is another piece of information that we're sort of planted early, that Dumbledore is not cool with the Dementors. He doesn't really trust them. He doesn't really think that they're on the side of good, that just because that they are cooperating with the Ministry and running Azkaban doesn't mean that he thinks that they're good creatures in any way, shape, form, or fashion. And they aren't. But, they don't have like an open war with wizards either. So anyway, point being is that Dumbledore doesn't like them and he doesn't trust them. And Mr. Weasley's like, I don't like them either if it comes to that. But Mrs. Weasley's like, well, if they save Harry, and Mr. Weasley's like, well, I won't say anything else against them. But of course, as it turns out, they're not going to quote unquote save Harry. In fact, it's going to be nearly the opposite. And so there's a lot of this one conversation has like a lot of setup for the story in the book. Like the things that they say that Mr. and Mrs. Weasley say to each other in this chapter. In this one conversation, like really does set up a lot of what's going to happen. So anyway, so then Harry hears them like sort of finishing their conversation and getting up to come out. So he gets the hell on and goes and finds the rat tonic, which is under the table where they sat for dinner, which is what Harry expected. And so he waits until he hears Mr. and Mrs. Weasley go back to their room and heads back up. And he runs across Fred and George, and they're laughing because they're hearing Percy like dismantling the room, looking for his badge, and they're like, we've got it. We've been improving it. And now it says big head boy. But Harry's not really in a mood to laugh at one of their jokes like he normally would be right now, so he kind of forces a laugh and heads back up and gives Ron his rat tonic and heads to bed. And so he's like, now he's got to contemplate, like, so this is why. And it all, like, everything that's happened up to this point since he left the Dursleys is sort of like clicking into place. And he's like, this is why Fudge was so lenient, because he was worried and relieved that he was even alive in the first fucking place. Like, forget being arrested or expelled or in trouble. He's just, he didn't get found or killed. Which, of course, he did get found, but, that's a whole nother story. Anyway, And he understands that this is why, too, that Fudge asked him, or not asked him, but made him promise to stay in Diagon Alley, because, again, there's a bunch of wizards to keep an eye on him. And now he understands why they're taking the cars. It's like everything that was a little bit of a question mark up to this point, like, all makes sense to him now, because he's like, oh, everybody's trying to look out for me. And, of course, this goes back to what I was talking about earlier. It's like with Harry, everything is about making sure that he's okay and like special circumstances and this, that, and the other. And again, it's like he doesn't ask for any of it, but it's like, his parents were good people. They were popular. People liked his family in general. And Harry's the one who's, even though he didn't do anything physically because he was a baby, he's the reason why Voldemort's gone. So it's like, People can't. It's one of those weird situations where like people can't hardly help but feel the way they do about him, and yet he can't do a damn thing about it because he was a baby when the circumstances occurred. So everybody, it's like a situation that's virtually unavoidable. As far as how he's treated, I mean. Anyway, blah 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 blah, and so Harry's just sort of thinking it all through, and he's remembering that Black supposedly murdered 13 people with one curse, and obviously the Weasleys are worried that Harry would be scared, or especially Mrs. Weasley would be worried that he'd be scared or panic-stricken if he knew about this. But Harry also happens to agree with Mrs. Weasley that anywhere Dumbledore is probably the safest place to be on Earth, which is actually true. Dumbledore is arguably the most powerful wizard in the world, as far as anything we know about, anyway. Obviously, there's possibly people elsewhere, but and again, he's thinking about, and he's like, these Azkaban guards everybody keeps talking about. And he's becoming more and more aware that everybody seems scared as shit of them too. It just frustrates me. I mean, I get it. I know I keep saying it. I'm just like a broken record on this thing. I'm like, I get why she saved the word, but it also just annoys the shit out of me because, well, it's because if somebody had said the word up to this point and it was around him, he would be like, what's a Dementor? And then the question would have had to have been answered. But fuck, I mean, there's so much description about what they're like in a way. Well, no, it's just about, no, it's not. Everybody's just talking about how they're unpleasant and they're scared of them, but they don't really, we don't get the description of what they actually do to a person until after the first encounter. I'm sure that this was probably something that she went back and forth on and just decided on doing this, and it's hard to blame her, but it is still annoying because because she's planting the information about him, you keep seeing the words Azkaban guards so many fucking times, and it just isn't plausible that people would all say that, because it's not just one person. Everybody uses this terminology until they don't. Anyway, right. So anyway, he's like, well, shit, I mean, if they're going to be stationed at the entrances to the school and Dumbledore's there, it doesn't really seem like Black has a very good chance of getting in. So, as it turns out, after thinking all that through, Harry's actually, like, his biggest bother in his mind right now is the fact that the chances of him going to Hogsmeade this year are pretty much zero, which from an outsider's perspective seems like not a big deal, but for Harry it is a big deal because that's where all his friends are going to be doing, and it's a pretty cool place to go. It's like, you know, next to where he is right now, it's like the coolest place in England. So yeah, blah 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 blah. And so he's like, man, I'm going to be watched all year, or at least until they find Black. And he's just kind of frustrated because he's like, man, you know, and this is where he starts to feel like, man, you know, I've already like escaped Voldemort 3 times. Like, you know, does everybody think I'm like just useless? Like I can't take care of myself? Like what the fuck? But it's like, he's 13. Nobody his age has ever faced what he's faced in this in this world, you know? And so of course they can't. Just because he's been fortunate enough and skilled, but also fortunate enough to not have been, you know, killed by Voldemort up to this point, he's still a fucking school kid. So of course the adults are going to try and make sure that he's looked after. They can't help themselves. I mean, they would be being irresponsible if they didn't. And there's already enough like irresponsibility amongst the adults in the story at times that that this can't be one of those things. And then he remembers the fucking Death Omen thing again. The thing he saw, and well, not so much just the Death Omen, but he remembers the beast he saw in the shadows of Magnolia Crescent, And then he remembers what to do when the worst is coming. And he says out loud, I'm not going to be murdered. And his mirror's like, that's the spirit, dear. And that's how the chapter ends. So, there it is. So, and the next chapter we will get into is called, in fact, The Dementor. So we can get past this shit finally. All right, so now it's that part of the show, as it were, where we go and check our comments and see what people have had to say and respond. Let's see. Jorge, let me know what the phenomenon where, because this came up when I was talking about the Dementors and other things in the story. The phenomenon, I don't think I'm going to be able to pronounce this. The phenomenon where you see something or hear something, and then after you've seen it or heard it or understood it for the first time, that you then start noticing it everywhere. It's the Bader-Meinhof phenomenon, named after a German far-left militant group due to a linguist hearing of the group twice in a short period of time. I see. Jorge tried to explain crumpets to me. He said they were a little hard to describe, but they are small griddle cakes made from unsweetened batter of water or milk and flour and yeast. He also says that they're kind of a cross between Scotch pancakes and Yorkshire pudding, which unfortunately I don't know much about either, so that doesn't help. But it does say that they're great eaten warm with butter and sometimes jam. I kind of have an idea. It almost makes me think of what not exactly, but like what Americans refer to as biscuits, which is a completely different thing than what English people or Brits call biscuits, but not exactly. But the idea of it being warm and buttered and possibly with jam, sometimes those types of elements kind of make me think of American biscuits to a degree. So I have a rough idea. And it's mentioned in that previous chapter that Fudge was actually buttering his crumpets. So anyway, Diana Rook mentions that Hermione performs some spells on the train on their first day. So this is all in reference to the underage wizardry thing. So their first day at school on in the first book. Well, first of all, magic is okay on the train, so that part isn't a big deal. But she does say that she's tried some other simple spells and they've worked. And that would be, if she did them before she got on the train, that would be underage magic. And Dia suggesting that perhaps because it was before she was able to know that the rule existed, she gets a pass. And that's probably true. Like, I think it's mentioned at the end of the first book that they get like a notice that says that they're not able to do magic during the holidays because and so I guess Hermione must have been in that little period of time after Hermione got her letter and went to Diagon Alley and purchased her first wand, well, her only wand, and came back home, that she must have tried some spells, and that, maybe, yeah, probably when you're underage, like not underage, obviously they're all underage, but before you're school age at all, if you do magic at home, it's probably, the chances of you doing anything dangerous is like not very high, so maybe you do get a pass until after your first year of school, because then you've kind of learned some shit that could actually do something. So yeah, that's probably possible. But anything that they do on the train is legit, because that's one of the things that they talk about at the end, or that Rowling talks about at the end of some of the books, where they're like savoring their last bit of time to be able to do magic on the train before they get to platform 9 3/4 and then have to go back into the Muggle world. And then lastly, Katie Joseph said that Harry could make his luggage fly because of Wingardium Leviosa. But the problem with that is that's not what the text said. It didn't say he could make his luggage fly. It said that he could bewitch it to become feather light. And that would be a different charm, because Wingardium Leviosa is like literally to make things fly, like you said. But that's not what he's talking about. He's talking about making it where he could tie it to his broom and it wouldn't be heavy, and then he could fly on his broom and carry it without it like weighing him down real heavily. So I don't really know what charm that's supposed to be, but it's not one that's mentioned. But clearly he learned it. And I will admit that, like, I've always, like, for a while I've been skeptical about like how much shit they actually do learn in school. But like what I've been paying more attention in my more recent listen through of the series, and there's a lot of times where they talk about like the homework they do, the spells they practice. Like there's a lot that they're clearly learning, sort of quote unquote off camera, that becomes applicable later, or just in their lives in general. So it's not unfeasible to me that he would know this charm. It's just one of those random things that, since she mentions it, you kind of almost think like, well, how did I miss this? But it's just something that he must have learned somewhere along the way. But I don't think it's Wingardium Leviosa. I don't think. It doesn't seem like it anyway, based on the descriptions of what the charms actually do. And let's see, is there anything else? I think that's it. We're keeping up pretty good right now. So yeah, I think we're good there. We're gonna get into the meat of things a bit in the next. Well, this chapter set up a lot again. Even though most of it was kind of fluff in a way, just learning little bits about Diagon Alley and this, that, and the other. The next one, obviously, we're going to have our first encounter with a Dementor, and we're going to meet a teacher, a new teacher who's easily one of my favorite characters, and probably a lot of people's favorite characters, or at least one of their favorite characters. So yeah, that's what's going to happen. But that's, I believe, it for this episode, and so we will see you next time. Enjoy the rest of your day part, and yeah, peace.